You glance out your kitchen window on a quiet, frost-edged Tuesday morning. The world is half asleep, wrapped in a pale, damp mist that clings tightly to the glass. Hanging just beyond the pane, your wooden bird feeder swings gently in the crisp draft, a scatter of sunflower seeds catching the weak morning light. To anyone else, it's a picture of domestic tranquility, a peaceful suburban tableau, where harmless, cheerful little creatures drop in for a quick breakfast before the rush of the day. You've watched them 1,000 times. You know their bouncy hops, their soft twitters, the familiar flash of feathers against the gray backdrop of the fence, except today, something is fundamentally different. You notice a cluster of birds gathering high up in the dense branches of the oak tree above your roof. They aren't feeding, they aren't singing. They're just standing completely motionless, staring down into your yard with an intense, synchronized stillness. You think you know who's visiting your property. You think they're just random, harmless visitors pausing for a meal. Honestly, you're entirely breathtakingly mistaken. Because while you watch them peck casually or cluster tightly in the upper canopy, a chilling, invisible drama is playing out right in front of your face. Behind those innocent, bead-like black eyes lies a reality so bizarre, so fiercely calculated, and so alien to our human understanding of nature that if you truly comprehended what was happening just inches from your glass, you would never look at your backyard the same way again. Here's what's really happening beneath the surface. Those gatherings aren't accidental social clubs. They're an active, highly organized security grid mapping your immediate environment. Most people walk through life assuming that the creatures sharing our immediate domestic spaces are simple. We believe birds are background noise-cute, decorative ornaments of the ecosystem that operate purely on instinct, fluttering from branch to branch with empty heads and gentle hearts. We imagine our yards are safe havens, pastoral sanctuaries, where nature exists in a state of harmless grace. The truth is darker, stranger, and honestly a lot more fascinating than we think. Now here's where it gets interesting. Think about this for a second. When you step out onto your back deck, or when a sudden shadow cuts across your lawn, why do those birds shift position instantly? Now flip this around. They aren't just reacting to you, they're calculating you. They're broadcasting your movements across a living acoustic network that stretches across the entire neighborhood. Beneath those ordinary feathers are organisms that have quietly mastered tactical surveillance, spatial mapping, and a level of environmental coordination that puts human early warning systems to shame. They aren't just visiting your yard, they're monitoring it. They've mapped every hiding spot, memorized your daily schedule, and turned your trees into an active watchtower protocol. If you strip away the comforting illusion of the suburban garden, you realize you aren't the sole master of your property at all. You're just a neighbor living inside this intricate web of observation. Every time those birds gather in your trees, they're passing around vital survival data. And honestly, once you see the machinery behind the feathers, that illusion shatters for good. You start noticing the subtle cues, the calculated silences, and the precise choreography happening right outside your kitchen window. Think about this for a second. What if those gatherings aren't even meant for each other? What if they're meant for you? Look closer at the next assembly that forms above your house. Notice how there's no random motion. It's all replaced by this cold, calculating assessment of the horizon. But here's the part nobody tells you. That whole assembly is an active warning system, translating invisible environmental tensions into a language that dictates the safety of everything breathing beneath the branches. To really get the scale of this network, you have to look at how pattern recognition works inside the brain of a backyard bird. We tend to view animals as creatures of fleeting moments, living entirely in the present with no memory of yesterday or idea of tomorrow. But behavioral science shows a starkly different reality. A bird sitting on your fence post is running a continuous, multivariable logistical analysis of your yard. It tracks the exact density of the foliage, the microscopic shifts in wind velocity as it hits your gutter system, and the rhythmic cadence of your daily household routine. Here's what's happening when 3 or 4 distinct species sparrows, finches, and titmice suddenly land on the same branch and stop vocalizing at the exact same time. That sudden silence isn't just a quick pause for breath, it's a data consolidation phase. In that moment of absolute quiet, every single bird is cross-referencing sensory inputs, the distant vibration of a predator's footfall through the soil, the altered frequency of insect hums in the garden bed, and the subtle visual anomaly of a displaced shadow near your back gate. They're building a shared mental map of a threat that your human senses are completely unequipped to detect. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Think about what happens when you just walk past your window. To you, it's a casual, uncalculated notion. You're simply walking from the kitchen to the living room. But to the bird perched on the wire above your garden, your movement is a calibrated variable in a complex risk equation. They note your speed, your posture, and whether your hands are carrying anything. If your routine shifts even slightly, say, you step outside 10 minutes earlier than usual or pause longer than normal by the back door, that information ripples right outward. Think about this for a second. Have you ever noticed how a flock will suddenly erupt into the air all at once, as if connected by an invisible string, even when nothing appears to have changed in the yard? You look out, scan the grass, see nothing, and assume it was just random panic. But nature doesn't panic randomly. That coordinated flight, this is the part people miss. It's the physical manifestation of an algorithmic threshold being crossed. The collective risk score calculated by the network reached its tipping point, and the system executed an automatic evacuation protocol. Now flip this around. What does that actually mean for you? It means your backyard isn't just some passive painting. It's an active, responsive organism that registers your presence like a major weather pattern. You're the weather system they track. You're the giant variable that their whole daily survival strategy rotates around. When they're hanging out in your trees, they're quietly figuring out how to navigate your proximity without setting off a crisis. As you watch them shift their weight from one foot to the other on a branch, just look at the precision of their positioning. They keep these exact measured distances from each other, setting up a neat tactical grid right across the tree line. If a hawk were to glide silently over the neighbor's roof, that grid would instantly snap into a unified defensive formation a fraction of a second later, long before the predator even crossed your property line. They're practically seeing the future of your yard several minutes before it happens. And yet, most of us just walk right past them, completely blind to the sophisticated intelligence network humming 10 feet above our heads. We sip our coffee, check our phones, and treat the canopy like it's empty space. But the canopy is never empty. It's fully staffed, fully alert, and constantly processing information about you. Now let's push deeper into how this network actually locks onto your personal identity. Here's what's happening on a granular level. Backyard birds don't just see humans as one giant class of two-legged creatures. They recognize individual human identities with terrifying accuracy. If you've ever wondered why certain birds scatter the second you step outside while others hang around your feet or even as you walk up, it's not because of luck or mood. It's because you've been individually cataloged, profiled, and filed away in their little neurological database. Think about this for a second. Controlled studies have shown over and over that common garden birds from corvids down to small songbirds can actually tell apart individual human faces, clothing styles, and even walking gaits. If you walk out into your yard wearing a red jacket and scare a flock, that specific visual signature gets burned right into their memory. The next time you show up wearing that exact jacket, the warning network fires off instantly, broadcasting a personal alert across the local canopy. Here's the part nobody tells you. They're teaching this data to their offspring. Young birds sitting right there in the nest are soaking up warning sounds tied directly to your specific silhouette. They learn who feeds them, who completely ignores them, and who might be a hazard. You're basically walking through your garden, carrying a permanent reputation you didn't even know you were building. And I'll flip this around. Look at it from their perspective. To a bird, your house is this massive, stationary cliff dwelling that periodically spits out a very specific biological entity. They map your coming and going with clockwork precision. They know the exact minutes of the morning when your kitchen light flickers on, signaling that human life is starting up. They use your schedule as a safety clock. When you're active, certain predators stay away because your presence acts as an accidental deterrent. So some birds actually time their most vulnerable foraging moments to match your routine. Think about that for a second. You aren't just an observer in your yard. You're an anchoring fixture of their entire daily ecosystem. They rely on your predictability. And when your routine breaks, like when you go on vacation, stay indoors all day, or switch up the time you fill the feeder, the local network registers an anomaly. That anomaly triggers caution. The gatherings you see in your trees during weird hours, often just emergency councils assessing a sudden disruption in the predictable rhythms of your property. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Have you ever stood completely still by your window watching a bird on the lawn, only to see it suddenly stop pecking, snap its head upward, and lock its eye right onto the glass? That is not an accident. Even through glass, even in the shadow of your room, they can detect the micro movements of your eyes and the shifting silhouette of your form. In that split second, you're caught. They're confirming your status, updating their internal file on you, and deciding whether your current stillness poses a threat. And as you pull back from the window, feeling that strange, lingering sense of being watched, you realize just how thin the boundary is between our human world and their hyper-aware reality. You thought you were safely hidden inside, looking out at a passive landscape, but the landscape is looking back, cataloging every detail of your existence and baking your habits right into the survival calculus of the neighborhood. And that is just the foundation. Now let's shift layers and look at how they read your mood, your tension, and the invisible emotional atmosphere of your home. Here's what's happening right now. Birds are supreme readers of micro-behavioral physics. You might think your emotional state is locked safely inside your skin, but your physical body leaks continuous data through posture, breathing rhythm, and muscle tension. When you step outside frustrated, hurried, or anxious, your gait changes. Your shoulders tighten, your stride gets erratic, and the rhythm of your movements loses its predictable flow. And here's the part people miss. To the sensory network in the trees, an erratic human is a dangerous human. Predictable humans are safe. Unpredictable humans are volatile variables that can flush a flock or ruin a feeding zone. So when your behavior shifts, the birds adjust their spacing immediately. The gathering and the canopy tightens. The calls change frequency from relaxed, low-amplitude contact notes to sharp, high-pitched tension clicks. Think about this for a second. Have you ever stepped outside after a long, stressful day, feeling the weight of the world on your shoulders, and noticed an eerie, sudden silence fall over your garden? You might chalk it up to coincidence or the time of day, but it isn't. They registered your physiological shift before you even reached the bottom of the steps. Your tension acted as an environmental trigger, prompting the local sentinels to issue a subtle standing down order across the branches. Now flip this around. What happens when you're calm, centered, and moving with slow, deliberate grace? The network relaxes. The distance between you and the nearest foraging bird shrinks. They test your boundaries, creeping closer to the patio edge, realizing that a stable, calm human poses zero tactical risk. You become part of the natural background furniture of a benign giant whose presence actually provides cover against aerial predators like hawks and falcons. Though, here's what's happening beneath that apparent peace. Even in calmness, they're reading you for hidden opportunities. They know the exact timing of when you drop crumbs from your toast, when you water the garden beds, bringing earthworms to the surface, and when you leave the back gate unlatched. They've mapped the behavioral psychology of your household down to individual family members. They know who feeds them generously and who completely ignores them. Think about this. If you live with multiple people, just watch how the birds react differently to each person who steps into the yard. One person walks out and causes an immediate universal scatter. Another person steps onto the exact same spot, and the birds barely shift their weight. You might laugh and call it animal tameness, but it's actually targeted behavioral profiling. They've run the data on every human in your household and created a customized safety rating for each one. And now, here's where it gets really interesting, bringing us to the deep intelligence layer, the hidden cognitive mechanics that let these creatures process complex environmental threats in real time. We look at a bird's brain tiny, smooth, lacking the convoluted neocortex of mammals, and we just assume their mental processing must be primitive and simple. But evolutionary biology has revealed a stunning plot twist. Avian brains are packed with an exceptionally high density of neurons, wired in a hyper-efficient architecture that rivals mammalian intelligence in specific domains. They don't need a heavy, folded cortex because their neural pathways are optimized for rapid, parallel processing of spatial, acoustic, and social data. Here's what's happening inside that tiny skull when a flock gathers above your house. They're running a decentralized, cloud-like intelligence network. No single bird is in charge. Instead, every individual acts as a sensory node, collecting local data: wind pressure, shadow movement, acoustic echoes, and broadcasting it instantly to the rest of the group through subtle postural adjustments and microcalls. Here's what nobody tells you. This collective intelligence lets them solve complex spatial puzzles that would stump many mammals. When a flock assesses a new object in your yard, say, a new lawn ornament, a strange garden hose, or a hidden predator camouflaged in the ivy, they don't just rush in or blindly flee, they engage in a structured, multi-stage risk assessment. First, scouts approach while the main group maintains a perimeter watch. Then they exchange coded vocalizations that encode the novelty level and potential threat score of the object. Think about this for a second. They possess a functional language system composed of syntax, modifiers, and referential alarms. When a chickadee issues a mobbing call, the number of trailing D notes at the end doesn't just express general agitation, it encodes the exact size, shape, and danger level of the predator. A small, agile pygmy owl triggers a radically different acoustic signature than a slow, lumbering cat. Every bird in the neighborhood hears that call, decodes the threat metric instantly, and adjusts its behavior without ever seeing the predator itself. Now flip this around. When you hear that sudden, frantic chorus of alarm notes outside your window, you're listening to a live, broadcasted intelligence report about a threat moving through your own property. They're translating the invisible dangers of the undergrowth into a shared acoustic map that covers your entire neighborhood. And when that map lights up, the entire garden shifts from a peaceful feeding ground into a highly coordinated defense grid. Every bush, every fence post, and every tree branch becomes an assigned station in an emergency protocol. And you're standing right in the middle of it, largely oblivious to the complex, military-grade communication unfolding around your ears. As you begin to grasp the sheer depth of this cognitive architecture, the entire world outside your window undergoes a profound transformation. Step back and look at your suburban yard, not as a passive collection of grass, dirt, and decorative plants, but as an invisible, high-stakes battlefield governed by ancient survival metrics. Every square foot of your property is mapped, contested, and monitored 24 hours a day. The air above your roof is an invisible highway of acoustic signals, threat warnings, and status reports bouncing back and forth between the canopy and the undergrowth. Think about this. When you walk out your front door tomorrow morning, you aren't stepping into a quiet, sleepy neighborhood. You're stepping into an active listening post. The moment your foot touches the pavement, a silent ripple of data moves through the trees. The local sentinels note your arrival, cross-reference your identity against their database, assess your current demeanor, and relay your trajectory to every other creature within a 3-block radius. Here's what's happening that nobody tells you. You are never truly alone in your own space. You're perpetually accompanied by an invisible audience of hyper-observant critics who know your habits better than some of your own family members. They know when you're late coming home from work. They know when you forget to bring in the trash cans. They know when a storm is brewing long before the barometer on your wall even starts to twitch. Now flip this around. This realization shouldn't make you feel paranoid or unwelcome in your own yard. Instead, it should fill you with a deep, quiet sense of awe. You're sharing your domestic space with one of the most sophisticated, ancient, and resilient intelligence networks on planet Earth. Evolution has spent millions of years refining these creatures into masters of perception, and they've successfully integrated their ancient survival machinery right into the heart of our modern human landscapes. Every time you toss a handful of seed onto that wooden tray, you're not just feeding hungry animals. Honestly, you're paying tribute to a local intelligence network. You're entering this quiet, cross-species contract built on observation, predictability, and mutual awareness. They watch your back for unseen hazards like hawk lines, creeping felines, or sudden drops in the atmosphere, while you provide the predictable calories that fuel their daily patrols. As you stand by your kitchen window tonight watching the last pale light fade from the horizon, listen closely to the final evening calls echoing through the trees. Those aren't just random bedtime chirps, they're the closing security check of the day. The final confirmation that the perimeter is secure, the shifts are logged, and the network is settling into its nocturnal watch. Which of your daily backyard routines do you think the local birds have mapped out the most accurately? Drop your thoughts below.